Before long, all of Iran's defense companies will become targets of attack. Our side has declared that it will continue increasing pressure on Iran, maintain the momentum of the offensive, tighten the pace of operations, and steadily expand pressure on every front. The message delivered is unmistakably hardline. There will be no compromise and no mercy for forces regarded as hostile. As the Strait of Hormuz came under sustained fire from Iranian missiles and UAVs, pushing commercial shipping into an extremely dangerous situation, the U.S. Navy swiftly deployed a carrier strike group and cruisers to the area to manage the crisis, restore maritime security, and reopen one of the world's most vital strategic shipping routes. The aircraft carriers and their escorting cruisers accelerated to maximum speed, urgently moving toward the strait. On every warship, combat readiness was raised to the highest level as all units entered a full state of operational alert. From the carrier decks, fighter jets launched one after another, climbing into the sky to establish protective air patrols overhead. At the same time, all missile launch systems across the fleet were thoroughly checked, confirmed to be functioning properly, and placed on standby for immediate engagement at any moment. Each bomb, weighing roughly 2,000 pounds, was transported on specialized loading carts through the hangar deck and staged near the aircraft elevators for transfer to the flight deck. There, they would be integrated onto fighter aircraft, preparing them for airstrikes against Iranian military targets, from the coastline to deep inland. On the upper deck, technical crews had already moved into a fast-paced rhythm, continuously mounting missiles and bombs while finalizing the combat loadouts of helicopters and fighter jets standing by for launch. Air-to-air missiles were secured one by one onto the wingtip rails, while guided bombs were carefully lifted and mounted onto the underwing hardpoints. Each weapon then went through connection checks, technical testing, and final confirmation that it was ready for combat. The safety pins remained in place until the very last moment, when the official launch order was given. Meanwhile, on the flight deck, the A-18F Super Hornets, already fully armed and cleared through inspection, began slowly taxiing toward the catapults, moving step by step into their launch positions. One by one, the fighter aircraft moved into launch position, locked onto the catapult system, pushed their engines to maximum power, and were hurled off the bow under the immense force of the launch system. The moment each jet left the deck, it pitched sharply upward and banked toward Iranian airspace, carrying enough weapons for multiple strike runs before returning to the carrier. At the same time, a detachment of Marines was brought aboard by a V-22 Osprey, landing in Section A of the flight deck and adding to the already urgent pace of force deployment across the warship. This Marine detachment was deployed to the carrier to reinforce the ship's security perimeter, while also remaining ready to take part in ground operations if the situation required an expanded scope of action. They stepped off the V-22 Osprey in full combat gear and were quickly directed below deck to receive their specific assignments. Deep inside the ship, other units also began making defensive preparations, signaling that the entire carrier was steadily shifting into a state of readiness to respond to any scenario that might unfold. They moved urgently along the steep steel ladders to the upper decks, carrying Stinger missiles and sniper rifles on their shoulders, small weapons, yet ones that could decide survival in the briefest of moments. As they spread out along the perimeter of the warship, each man quickly took position behind the railings and on elevated observation points, silently fixing his gaze on the horizon and the airspace ahead. In war, the most frightening threat is often not what has already appeared, but what is still rushing in unseen. That was why the Stinger teams immediately shouldered their launchers, activated their targeting systems, and widened their field of view in every direction, as if any angle of approach could become the point where danger suddenly took shape. At that very moment, In another section of the ship, technical crews were rushing to load ammunition into the Phalanx CIWS, an automated defensive gun system designed to destroy incoming missiles and drones at extremely close range. The ammunition drum was quickly filled, the system was powered up, and within seconds, the radar-guided turret began sweeping continuously, automatically searching for any target that might appear in its sector. On board the warship, every rotation of that gun now seemed to signal one thing. The final defensive line was fully armed and ready to fire. With the CIWS now fully in combat-ready status, the ship had effectively raised its final shield against any target that might break through the outer defensive layers. On the upper deck, soldiers took their positions behind the mounted heavy machine gun, quickly loading the ammunition belt, charging the weapon, and firing a short burst into the water for testing. The sharp, dry report of the gun echoed across the deck, and the weapon cycled smoothly just as expected. A second burst followed immediately after, serving as the final confirmation that all firepower aboard the ship was ready for real combat conditions. Sailing in formation alongside the aircraft carrier was an escort cruiser, holding its position with quiet precision while carrying enough firepower to alter the course of the battle within minutes. Every system aboard had already entered combat-ready status. Tomahawk missiles stood by for long-range strikes. Anti-air missiles remained locked in rapid response readiness, and radar systems swept continuously for any sign of danger. The cruiser's mission did not end with protecting the carrier. When the moment came, it too would unleash its own firepower, turning the escort line into a striking force in its own right. On the cruiser's deck, Marines quickly boarded MH-60 Nighthawk helicopters to establish an outer security perimeter. Once airborne, the helicopters flew wide patrol patterns around the warship, while the door gunners remained ready, watching for small boats, UAVs, and any other threat approaching the formation. The entire fleet had locked into its highest state of combat readiness, fully loaded with firepower and accelerating straight toward the Strait of Hormuz. Every warship, every aircraft, and every weapon system stood ready to fire, all aligned toward Iran in a suffocating display of force. Deep inside the Combat Information Center, crews worked second by second, their eyes fixed on radar screens glowing red in the darkness. Every unusual signal on the water, every slight movement in the sky was being tracked with intense scrutiny, signaling that the machinery of war was now operating at full power. Surface contacts, air contacts, friendly aircraft, and even unidentified returns. Every signal is tracked under tight control, identified, classified, and logged without missing a single detail. Officers work in constant coordination with the other ships in the formation, sharing threat data and refining the tactical picture in real time so that not even the smallest movement escapes attention. On the flight deck, the air boss directs the entire flow of aircraft operations from a control station with a commanding view of the runway, ensuring that every launch, recovery, and movement is executed in exact sequence within a high-pressure environment where precision is everything. Every fighter returning from its mission is brought under immediate and disciplined control. The air boss records exactly which aircraft has landed safely, what condition it is in, and what must be done before it can be cleared to launch again. One jet may only need to be refueled. Another may require a complete weapons reload. A third may be flagged for maintenance after a technical warning. Even a single hydraulic problem is enough to trigger a full inspection before that aircraft is allowed back into the sky. The elevator carries those weapons up through the decks to the hangar bay. From there, another crew takes over, moving them to the aircraft elevator for direct transfer to the flight deck. Once topside, the arming teams immediately receive them, wheel them to the waiting fighters, and begin loading the munitions. That cycle never stops. The moment one load of munitions reaches the flight deck, the next is already rising from below. The magazines keep supplying, the hangar crews keep transferring, and the flight deck teams keep loading the waiting fighters. 3 levels of the ship, 3 teams moving as one, all to keep the jets armed, ready, and in the air around the clock.